You can, of course, film the members of the press. Yeah, I'm not going to protect them. Members of the press, thank you for coming. As you can see, the alt-right is growing. The alt-right is real, and the alt-right exists in the real world. We had a press conference that was maybe a tenth of this size this past September, which was a wonderful event at the Willard Hotel. And at that point, I talked a little bit about the essences of the alt-right, getting away from the silly stereotypes that you'd expect from people like Glenn Beck, and really trying to understand who we are and what we believe. And I have to be honest, I think that the level of reporting on the alt-right actually has increased. It is moved from, wow, just wow, look at these people. It's actually moved to a level of attempting to understand. And I certainly do appreciate that. Now, I would like to make some opening remarks about what the alt-right can do moving forward. And then we'll have what is ultimately an Ask Me Anything affair. We have most all of the speakers here right now. You can ask us what we think about the world, what we think about the election, what we think about the alt-right moving forward. When we had our press conference earlier in September, I talked about some essences of the alt-right that I guess I could reiterate. One of those essences is that race is real, that race matters, and that race is the foundation of identity. Another one of those essences is that it's a question of where the alt-right is coming from. Although it's easy to talk about the alt-right in terms of some colorful movement from the past, the fact is the alt-right is really coming from 2016. The alt-right is a overwhelmingly young movement. And the alt-right is coming from an experience of young people entering minority status, a young white person, someone who could have been once a fish in water, who wouldn't have had to think about things like race and identity, someone who is now experiencing multiculturalism, and thus his consciousness of who he is increasing. I think this general trajectory is the historical foundation of the alt-right, and I think it is also the historical foundation of the Trump campaign, even if most people who vote for Trump aren't quite willing to use these terms and aren't quite willing to articulate it as such. Now, just to get the conversation started, I'm going to talk about a few principles moving forward, and these are things that we can bring, and only we can bring, to politics and the political discussion. I've said this before. I think the alt-right predated Trump easily, but I think the alt-right, in a way, at that point, was too often talking to itself. It was a kind of head without a body. We were always engaging in highfalutin, very interesting discussions, but we weren't really connected with the outside world. I think you could look on the other side and see the Trump movement as something that is a kind of body without a head. It has a real basis. Donald Trump, and unbelievably as a media star and real estate tycoon, was able to reach real people in ways that Republicans could not. But the Trump movement was a kind of body without a head. Trump had a lot of good instincts when it came to foreign policy. I think that was clear. His denunciation of George Bush's wars, his discussion of the increasing irrelevance of NATO, I think those were great instincts. But and obviously he had great instincts in terms of immigration and the wall. But I think in terms of policy, Trump's movement was a bit half-baked. It wasn't there yet. You could see this as the first stage of something, but it wasn't the completion of something. I think moving forward, the alt-right can, as an intellectual vanguard, can complete Trump. We can be the ones who are out in front, who are thinking about those things that he hasn't quite grasped yet, who are putting forward policies that certainly might be on the right of the Overton window, that are on the vanguard, the bleeding edge, but policies that really have a realistic chance of being implemented. That is the new challenge for the alt-right. Now, I'm going to talk about 4 things just to get the conversation started. And the first one is a bit political, but it's also moral as well. Last night, we successfully held a dinner meeting for about half of the people who are attending this conference. That dinner meeting was attacked by so-called anti-fascists who appear to be quite fascist themselves in the sense that they are very willing to use physical violence. They are very willing to use physical violence in order to suppress speech, period. I was assaulted. I was sprayed with some kind of shit-smelling substance produced by these people, I guess fittingly. Perhaps it emerged from the person himself, but it looked like he was spraying people with an eyedropper of some sort, or a spray thing. He actually sprayed some employees who happened to be black, by the way, of the restaurant. So that's what we're dealing with. As many of you know, all 5 accounts of NPI were suspended, I hope not permanently, but they have certainly not been reinstated, by Twitter. This was not a case where I said some nasty, mean thing to someone, or I used a harsh word or something like that. This was not the case at all. I was actually engaging at the time of my suspension with an interesting discussion with David Frum, a very long-time adversary of alt-right people, me, but also certainly Peter Brimlow and some others. That suspension was not about trolling. It was certainly not about harsh language. That suspension was about viewpoints. I think that some very important questions need to be asked about free speech in the 21st century that we have not asked before. When people think of censorship, they think of, a dictator twirling his mustache and pointing a gun at a journalist or wiping out headlines in a newspaper. The fact is, Twitter has much more power than even any government on earth in terms of our daily discourse. It is the digital public square for everyone, from the President of the United States to some teenager talking about sports, or Justin Bieber, to journalists sharing ideas, to political dissidents of all sorts. Twitter is it. It's the pulse of the internet. It's the digital public square. Being censored from Twitter in the 21st century is really the equivalent, in many ways, of being censored by a government in times past. It is that strong. It is that much of a restriction on our ability to communicate with you. So there is something that I would like to ask from every member of the press here, and it's a very reasonable request. Clearly, you are interested in us. You're here. There have been hundreds of stories written on or about or around the alt-right over the past year. I think that's been an amazing thing. What I would like to ask from you is that if we are going to make ourselves available to you, which I and many other people have, that you return this, what we've given to you, with some support for free speech in the 21st century. If we're going to be interviewed by you, if you're going to report on us, Twitter is the primary platform for us to respond, correct something, disagree here and there, or endorse it. That is the platform. That is our way to get our opinions out there. This is our interface with the outside world. And again, I'm using Twitter because I just got suspended, but you could say the same thing about Facebook. You could say the same thing about, say, iTunes or SoundCloud, and it goes on and on. We live in a new reality in terms of what censorship is in the 21st century. It is not just a matter of governments cracking down. Private organizations like Twitter or Google have much more power. Imagine what it would be like if Google began censoring search results. You could not even discover ideas that were outside of the thought prison of the modern West. So what we are asking is that you stand up for us. That does not mean that you have to endorse anything that we believe. It simply means that you stand up for our right to speak. The only way we can go forward, the only way that we can communicate with you is if you stand up for that right. So please do that. It's terribly important. Now, what can we add? What can we add? Donald Trump's campaign was the first step towards identity politics in the United States. I do not think that Donald Trump is alt-right. I don't think Steve Bannon is alt-right, as I would define the term. But I do think that we have, you could say, a psychic connection or a deeper connection with Donald Trump in a way that we simply do not have with most all Republicans. I didn't ultimately care who won the election of 2012. It was a lot like watching a NFL football game. It was amusing, but whoever came out on top ultimately meant nothing to me and ultimately wasn't going to fundamentally change reality. With Donald Trump, and we of course might be wrong, but with Donald Trump, something seemed to change. Even if I were a radical leftist, I would be actually excited about Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump means that the world's changing. It means that something new is coming into the political reality. It means that we can start thinking about politics differently. Donald Trump is the first person who doesn't say, I'm going to stick up for capitalism or I'm going to stick up for the Constitution. He said, I'm going to stick up for you, the people who voted for me. This is something new, and we in the alt-right are deeply connected with that, because if I were to sum up the alt-right in one word, it would be identity. And if I were to sum it up in a phrase, it would be identity, it matters. Identity is the foundation of politics, it's the foundation of culture, it's the foundation of society. That is what we are about. The identity of the United States of America, the identity of civic nationalism, the identity of this country we live in fundamentally derives from European people. It fundamentally derives from an Anglo-Protestant core, but it actually derives from the whole European family that came into this country after the Civil War. Hollywood and the media, we love this myth of Ellis Island. It's a kind of, in a way, terrible myth of losing one's roots, of being willing, excited about discarding one's heritage as just baggage and washing up on American shore as an individual to make money. Well, that is one myth of America. It's that Ellis Island individualist myth. There are certainly other myths of America. That's the myth of colonizers, of founders. That's the myth of frontiersmen. It's the myth of people who shed blood to conquer an untamed land. If we move above myth and we think about history itself, just as there is a history of mass immigration in the United States, of course there is, certainly in recent times, there's also a history of taking a break and forming a nation. The first immigration law in the United States in 1790 restricted immigration to European people. In 1924, America restricted immigration, and we effectively had a net neutral, sometimes even net negative immigration for 40 years until 1965 when that was reversed. I don't think it's a coincidence that in that 40-year period, you saw the height of American culture, the height of American national identity, ethnic, regional rivalries dissolved. You actually had the height of America as a geopolitical power. America needs to take a break. One fundamental policy initiative that we're going to put forward is a break on all immigration, particularly non-European immigration, for a 50-year period. This is something that's certainly out in front of anything that Donald Trump said. Donald Trump focused on illegal immigration and the wall and so on. But this is something that I think can be quite attractive and I think can really resonate certainly with his voters, but I think can resonate with all other people. The age of mass immigration, the age of multiculturalism has been an age of division and fragmentation. Let's become a nation again. We've lived through this experience, we can change it. Fascinatingly, Donald Trump was the first Republican whose foreign policy agenda I did not passionately loathe. I don't quite know the origin of George W. Bush's war on terror. It seemed to have some resonances with the better dead than red and roll back the Soviet Union type impulses from the Cold War era, but I think it was put on steroids and it was made even worse. It was a kind of horrible combination of Cold War militarism, humanitarian so-called interventionism, and freedom fries. It was an absolute disaster. I don't know anyone, any intelligent, sensible person on the left and right who does not think that a Bush-era foreign policy is utterly bankrupt. The fact that George W. Bush effectively, the fact that Donald J. Trump effectively denounced Bush and the war in the South Carolina primary reveals the importance of this. We've actually recently, at NPI, we've actually recently issued a paper called Beyond NATO. This is going to be the first in a long line of policy analyses and prescriptions that pick up on some good instincts of Donald Trump and articulate them in a more sound fashion. I think Donald Trump often does have very good instincts. But again, a lot of the policies that he's put forth haven't been fully baked. So over the course of the next year, and I'll just end it here because I think you guys are hoping to ask a lot of questions. Over the course of the next year, we are going to issue 6 policy prescriptions on foreign policy, on immigration, on American greatness in terms of natural conservation, and other matters that we hope will directly impact a Trump administration. The idea of a vanguard is not that they're going to implement everything we say. The idea of the vanguard is to be out in front, to see a little bit further and to chart a trajectory for where this administration can go. So I'm going to let you ask questions. I probably already talked too long, but I just wanted to announce that in terms of a major project the NPI is going to be issuing over the coming year. Every 2 months, there will be a new policy paper that will affect foreign policy, immigration, domestic policy, and so on. So why don't we do this? Why don't we go into we've got another half hour. Why don't we do an Ask Us Anything? You can ask me anything about what I've just said. I brought the speakers up here as well. If you have any questions about the nature of the alt-right, if you have any questions about what I just said, please stand forth, and we will pass the mic around. But I'll just leave it on this. The alt-right is here. The alt-right is not going anywhere, and the alt-right is going to change the world. And you all need to pay attention to this. Yeah, Matthew, let's get the young, come here. Matthew, could you stand, if you'd like to ask a question to anyone, can you come, Matthew, could you just stand down there, and Matthew will hand you the microphone.
Hi there, Kristen Salumi from Al Jazeera. I'm just wondering if you can give us some specifics about what you're advocating the Trump administration to do in terms of immigration or foreign policy to start.
Yes, in terms of immigration, as I said, I think a goal would be net neutral immigration with a primary emphasis on Europeans who want to immigrate to the country. It's very simple. NATO was once about keeping the Germans down, keeping the Russians out, and keeping America in Europe. NATO has no reason for being in the 21st century. NATO is a obviously clumsy and obviously ineffective way of dealing with terrorism. NATO as an instrument of advancing the American sphere of influence vis-a-vis Russia is extremely dangerous. Another great instinct on Donald Trump that we want to emphasize is his feelings of friendship towards Russia. The Cold War is over. I just don't think Hillary Clinton and neoconservatives realize it yet. Donald Trump rightly sees Russia as, and Vladimir Putin in particular, someone who is structurally conservative. Vladimir Putin obviously wants to maintain a traditional Russian hegemony that in a sphere of influence. That's no concern of ours. And actually, Vladimir Putin wants to do some things that I think are very productive, such as promoting Russian identity and promoting the Orthodox Church. So Russia is someone that we are not going to have conflicts with. Hillary Clinton, who the administration, Joe Biden, has bragged about engaging in cyber attacks. Hillary Clinton did promote a no-fly zone over Syria. Hillary Clinton actually said that a cyber attack from Russia would be an act of war that she could respond to with anything up to nuclear weapons. That is utterly insane. Thank God Donald Trump was elected. I have to be honest, the world is a safer place because of Donald Trump.
Hi, my name is Ines Pohl from Deutsche Welle. It's very interesting listening to your words. I have two questions for you. How close are you to the Trump administration? When have you talked maybe to Donald Trump himself lately? And how does he comment on your new popularity? Did you did you get any congratulations? And how close are you to Steve Bannon? Is there any connection to him?
Well, I was tailing Donald Trump just, this morning over breakfast. I was like, this room needs more gold, No, we have no direct connection with Donald Trump. That was a joke. In terms of Steve Bannon, I don't know. I think a few of us have shaken his hand. There's no direct connection with Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon's an interesting person. I do not think Steve Bannon is alt-right. I think that is an inaccurate statement. However, I would say that there is some common ground between Steve Bannon. I think there's clear reasons why Donald Trump hired Steve Bannon. First off, being that Steve Bannon's a fighter, and Donald Trump likes that. But I think also he saw Steve Bannon as a kind of alternative perspective. Donald Trump recognizes that mainstream conservatism was against him. And that's a good thing. I think the Stephen Bannon hiring is a wonderful thing. But in terms of direct connection, no. But we don't need a direct connection to influence policy.
Hi, I'm Adele Stan with the American Prospect, and I'm curious as to whether or not there is any consensus among the various constituencies of the alt-right about what the #1 priority, what you would like to see Trump do first thing right off as soon as he takes office.
I guess I don't need to answer that. I do think building the wall is important. I think keeping us safe. One thing that Trump can do as president, he is effectively a dictator of foreign policy. Trump is not a lawmaker. as president. He executes laws that are made. However, in the realm of foreign policy, for good and for ill, the president is imperial. The president has almost dictatorial power over making that. I think he can dramatically change foreign policy on day one. In terms of building the wall, Donald Trump does not need Congress to build the wall. That can be an executive decision that is engaged with through the Department of Homeland Security. So that is also something he can do. In terms of changing immigration policy, that will take Congress. And so I don't think he can change immigration policy dramatically on day one, but I hope that would be his primary objective. This is why he was elected. He wasn't even elected on foreign policy, even though we can change that. He certainly wasn't elected on repeal Obamacare or anything like that. This is why he was elected, because he was the identity president.
If I may answer that question, this is Jared Taylor with American Renaissance. I think what the people in this room care about is whatever policies Donald Trump carries out that reduce the rate at which whites are being reduced to a minority. Anything that slows that process, we welcome. And obviously, one of the important things that is reducing us to a minority is immigration, whether it's legal immigration, illegal immigration, preventing illegals from coming in, sending illegals here back to where they are. All of these policies, for whatever reason, inaugurated, and I don't think Donald Trump thinks in racial terms, all of those policies will slow our dispossession, and that is what is vital to us.
Hi, Inez Novacic with CBS News. So far as I understand it, this is sort of the alt-right has a very racialized conception of identity. So how do you handle it when people call you racist?
I tell them, say something original, for heaven's sake.
I'm Peter Brimlow with VDare.com. Basically, our position is that when they say the term racism is, is a sign that you won an argument with a liberal, with the accusation of racism, and it's also similarly with, frankly, a lot of Republicans now, certainly the conservatives. My general answer is, what we say at VDare, and we're a forum site, is we don't have a racial expression, fundamentally racial expression. So we don't see America as essentially racial. We think it's an ethno-cultural entity, and it can assimilate people of different races. That's our general position, and we have writers of different races and so on who are concerned about, for example, the labour market impact of immigration, which exists regardless of the race of people who are coming in.
I think America and the Western world does have a racial component and a racial core that is utterly indispensable. Obviously, ethnicity plays a humongous role, but race is at the very center of that. And I don't think anyone in the alt-right could really get away from that.
But do you get offended? Do you get angry when people call you?
Not anymore. At point 1,000, where they've called you the racist, I think it doesn't mean anything. And when Glenn Beck is crying and calling you a racist, it's kind of fun. So.
I've probably been called a racist longer than anyone else up here. And for me, when people say you are a racist, it's just a form of name calling. They don't even know themselves what they mean precisely by this expression. It is simply a means to say you are a moral inferior, and therefore I don't have to listen to you. And when you're reduced to name calling, that's the most graceless way of admitting you've lost the argument.
Yeah, I was just going to say that one of the most encouraging things about the election was that Trump was called a racist for the entire campaign, over a year and a half, and it didn't have any effect. I think that's one of the big pluses here, that this this media, assault using that term is lost its ability to really matter anymore.
I'll add real quickly. The alt-right is definitely quite willing to work with allies of color. There are people who are not white who are interested in alt-right ideas. That's wonderful. There are people who are not white who respect what we're doing and want to work with us in a mutually beneficial way. That's also a great thing.
My question is for Mr. Taylor. My name's Adrian Florida. I'm with NPR. You wrote earlier this year that, I just want to sort of read something. Today, the U.S. officially takes the position that all races are equal. Many Americans cite the all men are created equal phrase of the Declaration of Independence to support the claim that the Founding Fathers anticipated this view of race. And then you say they are badly mistaken. And then you go on to cite a number of Founding Fathers, early American lawmakers, judges, expressing, I think, what can only fairly be called racist views. You quote Justice Roger Taney, who in a decision said this: they had, for more than a century before, speaking about African Americans, been regarded as beings of an inferior order and altogether unfit to associate with the white race, either in social or political relations, and so far inferior that they had no rights which the white man was bound to respect. And so, sort of throughout the course of this article, you're essentially citing early Americans to make this point, to draw this conclusion. Today's egalitarians are radical dissenters from traditional American thinking, a conception of America as a nation of people with common values, culture, and heritage is far more faithful to the vision of the founders. And so the question is, why should we, the media, journalists, not refer to you, the alt-right, as a white supremacist set of ideologies?
Well, first of all, white supremacy is presumably the desire of whites to rule over other people. I don't think there's anyone in this room who has that desire. I think the term white supremacist should be completely abandoned from the contemporary vocabulary. It really means nothing. It is an emotionally charged word used exclusively to try to discredit someone who has racial views that are even slightly heretical. I would abandon that term completely. As far as the term racist is concerned, it always has a pejorative connotation. And I reject any kind of pejorative view of my views of race, and I believe everyone here would do the same. If racist were simply a neutral word to discuss people who understand the importance of race, as Richard was saying, race is real, race is part of identity. If that's what racist meant, then fine, but that word cannot be retrieved or sanitized. But the point I'm making is that, as you quoted from that argument, the United States was founded as an explicitly European civilization and European nation. Don't forget, the purpose of the Declaration of Independence was to explain to King George III why we are saying bye-bye. There is no idle chatter about equality or everyone being equal in the real document that established the United States as a political entity, namely the Constitution. And so I stand absolutely by my view that the United States, up until just a few decades ago, was consciously established as an outpost of Europe and not as a grab bag, as some sort of entity which is really up for grabs to whoever one can come here. That is a complete repudiation of what America was established as and was carried forward as a civilization for the vast majority of its existence.
I'd like to ask a follow-up question. So you said that you... So one of the things that you said is that you reject the word racist in part because it's a pejorative word. There's this concept in linguistics called pejoration, which is the process by which a word becomes essentially sort of socially unacceptable, right, over time. And often this is followed by the adoption of new words to essentially encapsulate the same idea. With a word or term that is less sort of socially unacceptable. I'm wondering, has adopting this label alt-right essentially given everyone on this stage, has it made it easier for you to convince journalists, the media, to engage with views that a lot of people would view as white supremacist and racist? Has it given you that ability by adopting essentially what is a race-neutral term? Alt-right is sort of on its face a race-neutral term, but if you sort of dig down to a lot of the sort of views that we see on Radix Journal, on Breitbart.com or whatever, I think it's pretty clear that a lot of these advocate sort of views that are fundamentally racist.
I think your question is, I don't like you, and so maybe I shouldn't talk to you or something. You're just using. I mean, I don't understand really what you're saying, and I think we've actually answered this about 10 times.
I guess the question is that.
But I mean, yeah, I think the idea of identity matters. I like the term identitarian. It certainly hasn't caught on nearly as well as alt-right. In some ways, the alt-right is arbitrary. I mean, the whole point is that this is a movement of consciousness and identity for European people in the 21st century. That's what it is. If you don't like it, you can, talk about linguistics. But
No.
it's like,
I think the suggestion.
why don't we just ask someone else a question?
No, the suggestion in your question is that this is some kind of attempt to hide the ball, to pretend that we are not who we are. No one is guilty of that. We are as straightforward as any movement I can imagine. And alt-right, of course, includes an entire panoply of egalitarian orthodoxies that we reject. It's not just race. It has to do with the idea that every culture is equal to every other. All religions are equally sane and valid. The sexes are basically equivalent. All of these orthodoxies, there are many, many views within the alt-right. It cannot be summarized as simply a racial conception. So I reject completely the implication that we are somehow trying to pretend that we are something other than what we are. We are exactly what we say we are.
I guess I was asking.
Yeah, let's move on. Oh, you, and then you'll be next. Yeah, sorry.
Alex Emmons with The Intercept. Mr. Spencer, on NPR, you described the goals of your movement as saying you want to turn America into, quote, a safe space effectively for Europeans. And that makes it sound like you're calling for an unsafe space for non-Europeans. And in the wake of Donald Trump's election,
Why does one imply the other? A safe space for Europeans. I've just asked, and I've asked this from people in the journalist community to actually stick up for our rights to speak. It just seems like a non sequitur. Why is that unsafe for other people?
all right, well, my question is this.
Okay.
A lot of minority groups in this country, America's a multicultural country, are very, very afraid for their rights and security in the wake of a Trump election. And so I want to know exactly what are you calling for from a Trump administration for him to do with undocumented immigrant populations, children of undocumented immigrant populations, Muslim Americans right now who are terrified of being asked to put their name on a registry. What are you calling for him to do, and how is it remotely ethical or constitutional?
Loaded question. In terms of undocumented immigrants and their children, they've got to go home. And they can go home again. And they can reconnect with their real identity, which is not 21st century America. In terms of people who are non-white, who are citizens, no, nothing is going to happen to them in the Trump administration. Nothing has happened to them. I mean, you're worried. It's funny how people like you're looking at me in this very serious way. You should lighten up a little bit. But people are so worried about, Trump is elected. They're going to be just murdering non-whites in the street. Has anything like that happened? What we actually have seen happen is something like the reverse. I mean, the fact is there have been anti-election riots by Trump opponents. From the looks of it, most of them are non-white, and they're connected with BLM and other things like that. I think you're just kind of like not engaging with reality.
Let me
Who did you promise next?
I'd
What?
like to.
Her and then Rosie next. Sure, go.
All right. Trump himself has called for excessive policing of predominantly Muslim communities. He's called for police to infiltrate mosques. He said he would be open to the idea of a registry. How is this remotely hypothetical? They're dismissing these concerns. That he himself has proposed these policies.
I mean, those policies sound fine. Real quick follow-up question. I mean, ideas of surveilling mosques, that's already happening. Ideas of registries of undocumented immigrants, why is that a bad thing? Of Muslims? That's, to be honest, that's already happening in terms of surveillance of Muslims. It's tremendous. I just don't know what you're asking. You're just like, it's a kind of question like, how is that remotely moral?
Look, I'd like to make a point here. When you have Mexican Americans who are citizens, or you have Muslim Americans who are citizens, saying that they go to bed terrified that they may be dragged out of their beds and carted off to rail cars, this is a reaction to a Frankenstein monster Trump that you people created. They are not reacting to anything Donald Trump ever said. Not once did anyone, as any part of his campaign, talk about any kind of measure against Hispanic citizens, against Muslim American citizens that would give them the slightest reason to think this. It is you who called him a fascist, a threat to democracy. It is you who said that if he is elected, the American experiment could fail. It is this fantastic, hysterical view of Donald Trump that has caused this utterly unnecessary, cruel fear in the people that you claim to support and protect.
Let's move on.
Hello, I'm Elodie Mallet with Radio France. You said earlier that you wanted to be like you felt like you were a brain without a body, and you want to help a body without a brain. Can you explain us what are your lectures? What kind of books are in your library? What is feeding your culture, your literature?
Right. It's just a line of art of the deals. Actually, I would say this. I'm glad you're here from Radio France. I would say that many people here have been influenced pretty profoundly by the European New Right, which probably should properly be called the French New Right. Men like Alain de Benoit, Guillaume Faye. Robert Stoikers, and so on. One very interesting thing about the difference between the alt-right and conservatism is that we actually read books. I think it's one. But outside of the amazing tract Decision Points by George W. Bush, we're actually far more interested in European radical traditionalist philosophy, the conservative revolution in Germany. We actually have someone up here, Jason Giordani, excuse me, who's the editor of Arctos Publishing, which has done tremendous things in terms of translating European philosophy and bringing it to the Anglo-American audience. So yeah, we're interested in. I personally have a very strong interest in German idealism and Friedrich Nietzsche, but we all have our interest. I think it's clear to say we're coming from somewhere different than the conservatives, who kind of have a little paint-by-numbers ideology of ma constitution, ma capitalism, and ma bombin, ma Muslims. That's not where we're coming from. And I think as a French person, you would probably be more interested in our starting points.
Am I on? Hello, Richard. I'm over here. Oh. Hi, my name's Adam. I'm from The Guardian. So
there are a lot of Guardian fans in this audience.
Yeah, sounds like it. So obviously up on stage there's 7 men, and I was looking around before and there's not really very many women in here. Why do you think the alt-right is not able to attract women?
Oh, the alt-right does attract women.
I can't see any.
Are you blind?
All right, what, 5%? But no, seriously, why do you think you're not able to attract women?
I think that radical movements, generally speaking, whether they're the left and the right, are going to be predominantly men. At any kind of ideological or political conference, you're just going to find more men engaged in it. I don't think this demographic is particularly surprising or particularly different from other ideological movements. But I think it is very important to reach women. I agree. I think everyone agrees with this, and I think the alt-right offers much more for women than libertarianism or certainly the left, which has created a tremendous amount of unhappiness. It's unhappy 45-year-old cat ladies. And I think libertarianism, which offers them only, the prospect of career advancement, is also equally dissatisfying, if not more so. I think the alt-right offers them a chance to certainly fulfill themselves, but also to do that special thing that only women can do, and that's be a mother.
I would, sir.
What?
What is the alt-right offering to women? I'm sorry I gave the microphone back, but what is it offering that other groups are? The ultimate chance to be a mother.
I just answer. I mean, we offer them. I just answered the question. I mean, we offer them the kind of the happiness of true self-actualization.
But
we're not gonna. We don't have a program that's like, oh, we're gonna do this for women. I think one interesting thing that Ivanka Trump actually mentioned in the Cleveland, in her speech in Cleveland for the Republican National Convention, was this notion of a federally sponsored maternity leave. I think that's a wonderful thing. That is a kind of alt-right idea, and that's also our willingness to go outside the bounds of left and right. That's certainly something that I would support.
Just a data point. A data point for our friend from The Guardian. My website, amren.com, American Renaissance, fully 40% of the people who come are women. So what you may see here is not necessarily representative of the kind of interest that we have in the wider world.
Yeah, I think, yeah, not you. I think Rosie was next. Sorry. Okay.
Richard, you talked about Steve Bannon. You said that you don't really consider him to be alt-right per se. Mm-hmm. What about Breitbart News itself? Is Breitbart alt-right at this point?
Well, I would say that Steve Bannon's comment that it's a platform for the alt-right is probably something that I could agree with, say 90%, and just in the sense that it's clearly moved away from the conservative movement. It was pro-Trump, and it was also a site that tons of people on the alt-right like, they get their news from, they share, and so on. I don't think Breitbart is really ideologically alt-right, no. But again, it's interesting and it's very hopeful for me that Bannon is at least open to these things. Again, Bannon appeared to reference Alexander Dugin in a speech he gave to the Vatican. You can make of that what you will. You can make of Dugin what you will. But just the fact that he's a little more open than these just suffocating conservatives, I think was quite interesting. The fact that Breitbart didn't get sucked into the drain of Never Trumpism and was actually saw the promise of populism. I think that was also interesting and important. So again, Breitbart, Bannon, Trump, these are not alt-right as I understand it. The alt-right is a vanguard intellectual movement. Can we have some more common ground? Can we have some elective affinities? That's what we hope for.
Is there anybody else? I'll follow up. I'd like to follow up on the question about women. I know I read your article in Rolling Stone, or your comments that it was okay for Donald Trump to grope women, or it wasn't a big deal because deep down women want to be taken by a strong man. Does that mean it's okay for all men to grab women? It would seem to give permission in that way. So I just wonder if you want to clarify that.
No, I'm not endorsing physical harassment. My point was that Donald Trump, what he was talking about in the grab them by the pussy comment, This, as he said, this was locker room talk. These were words. In terms of going a little bit deeper, I would stand by those comments. I do not believe that we are atomistic individuals. I think that we come from hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution, and we need to be real about human nature. Yes, women deep down do want to be taken by a strong man. The fact is,
Does that not give
I've looked at a
all
lot
men
of
permission
I've looked
to
at a
act
lot
that
of
way, though?
I've looked at a lot of romance novels that women read, and I've noticed a distinct pattern. Romance novels about cubicle-dwelling, boring computer programmers who take women out to eat pizza don't sell very well. Romance novels about cowboys and Vikings, and it seems to be very popular. We might want to look at something like that and see if that tells us
But
something
who
about human
decides if
nature.
it's a strong man? Does the woman get to say? Does she have a choice? I mean,
Well, I guess I'll answer yes to that.
Well,
but,
the implication would be that for men, it would seem to give them license to act this way. That if you want to be taken seriously like a strong man, that's what women want. So,
I think you're just saying this. I'm not saying.
not-
What people want deep down our fantasy life, and who we are as who we are effectively as animals. That's sometimes something a little bit darker than what we'll express.
I guess it's like, what is a strong man? Who decides what a strong man is? You have to be rich and powerful to be able to act like that?
No, not necessarily. No, I think wow, it's kind of interesting. We're getting
Certainly.
this is taking on a new.
It certainly has. I'm something of an evolutionary psychologist, and it's that is textbook kind of stuff, that women are attracted to wealth and power, and there's good evolutionary reasons for that. That they would have someone who would father their children and be able to support them well. They would be upwardly mobile and so on. So, I mean, it's like I said, it's textbook psychology evolutionary psychology 101. Trump was a celebrity. He was wealthy. He's very attractive, and so yeah. If he comes on to a woman, I would say most women would probably like that. And as hard as that is to say, this is simple reality, because that's what happens in Hollywood all the time. And we know that someone like Brad Pitt is attracted to a lot of women. That's just life. Okay.
I don't have anything as interesting as this to say, but in the area that we focus on at vdare.com, which is immigration, we actually do have a lot of women who read the site and write to us. And the reason is that they often experience the impact of immigration at the social level in a way that men don't. Many years ago, I was at Forbes when Governor Dukakis came in to have breakfast with us, and his wife came as well. And it was just after, amazingly enough, California had passed an official English bill. And Dukakis, who was, not Dukakis, Dukmajian, I'm sorry, Dukmajian. Dukmajian, who was a very conventional Republican, didn't really know what to do about this bill. But his wife spoke up and was very forceful about it because she said she hated not being able to communicate with clerks in shops and people on the street and so on and so forth. I don't suppose Dukmajian did any of his own shopping.
I would also stress the degree to which the alt-right and alt-right ideas are good for women. One of the most terrifying and disgusting things that's happened in recent memory were these mass rapes of women in Cologne on New Year's Eve. And that was actually the tip of the iceberg in terms of Muslims abusing women in Europe. One thing we like about Trump is this visceral way in which he defends his people. Whatever you want to say about the alt-right, that we would defend our people and our women cannot ever be in doubt.
I would say, too, that one of the most disgraceful things about the left is that they seem to want more Muslim immigration. They want that way more than they're worried about any downside and any concern to especially to women. Let's face it, there's these rape gangs and everything else. Just Islamic law women really not having control of their lives. And so that, it's amazing that these leftists want this disease coming into our society, really, more than they want to protect themselves.
I think she's been holding up her hand for a little while.
Hi, Jennifer Hansler, ABC News. Richard, you mentioned earlier you want these policies to be realistic in terms of being able to be passed and enforced. Why are you confident that something like a 50-year break of immigration would be realistically passed?
I actually think such a policy is much more attractive than you might imagine. As a member of the mainstream media, to be honest.
But why?
If you talk, because immigration is not popular. And if you actually look at some things about Donald Trump, the proposed Muslim ban and so on, those coincided with these spikes in popularity. A lot of it is a way that we can articulate this to Americans, that undocumented people, they can go home again. You can go home again. The millions of people who want to come here, whether they're refugees or they're legal immigrants, they can reconnect with their own homes and their own societies, their own identity. It's not a cruel notion. We want to become a people again. I think that's something that's eminently attractive, and it's going to reach people on an emotional level. It hasn't been tried.
I guess I meant more logistically. Do you think you have the backing in Congress and with federal agencies to enforce something like a 50-year immigration break?
It's obviously possible. Post-Trump, I mean, the Republican Party has a new voting constituency. Trump has proven the power of these ideas. He has proven the power of populism to trump conservative ideology. So this is a logical implication of that. So again, I'm realistic in the sense that there are going to be a lot of people who find this, this is terrible, this is going against our basic values, and so on. But can something like that reach average Americans on an emotional level? Yes. I'm very confident about that.
Okay, and one more question. In the wake of a Trump election, we've seen an uptick in reports of people reporting anti-Semitic, racist, anti-immigrant incidents. Is this something that the alt-right condones?
To be honest, I don't even know what people are referring to with all of these kinds of things. What did someone say something nasty on Twitter?
We've seen swastikas painted on elementary schools. We've seen across the country
I actually do agree with Lana. I think I imagine that a lot of those might be hoaxes. A lot of them are examples of free expression. I'm not going to condemn like a category of things. I think everyone in the alt-right would condemn any kind of use of violence against an innocent person, and I think we'd mostly condemn any kind of direct threat of violence. But in terms of self-expression, you're not going to get me, or I don't think anyone else, to condemn something like that wholesale. I would have to look at individual cases. Anyone else? This has been fun. We probably should. All right, you haven't asked a question, and then we could Radio France one more time, and then maybe we'll end at 2:45.
Thank you, Richard.
Yes.
Hi, Pam Levy at Mother Jones.
It's a big fan. It's a fanzine of Richard Spencer. Yeah.
Yeah. Yesterday, when Donald Trump announced that his pick for Attorney General was Jeff Sessions, Andrew Anglin at Daily Stormer said that it was like Christmas. And he said that we're getting everything we wanted. Can you tell me your thoughts on the Sessions pick for AG, and if you agree with Anglin that this is getting everything you wanted?
I'm not sure it's getting everything we wanted. I think it's getting what is realistically possible. I mean, Jeff Sessions, again, is someone who is not alt-right, but who seems to see eye to eye with us on the immigration question. I think Jeff Sessions might very well resonate with something like a long-term dramatic slowdown of immigration. The fact that he is going to be at such a high level, I think, is a wonderful thing. I think in terms of what Jeff Sessions doesn't do and what has been engaged with by whether it's Loretta Lynch or Eric Holder, what he is not going to do in terms of federally prosecuting diversity and fair housing and so on, I think is just as powerful as what he might do. So it's about Jeff Sessions setting a new tone in Washington. I think that's a good thing.
Can you go a little bit more into what you're saying in terms of housing and such?
Yeah, I will say, Anglin is a very brilliant journalist, but he isn't really part of the alt-right. He's actually a flat-out neo-Nazi, and that's what he says he is. And it's like David Duke, really. Hillary attacked David Duke in her speech on the alt-right. But Duke's been around a long time. The alt-right is new, and it's significantly different. It's just that, people want to conflate the two.
Thank you. I'm Katie Glick with Politico. Two quick ones here. So first, on the immigration proposal that you noted, you said it's obviously possible post-Trump to look at doing something more restrictive like that 50-year ban. So I wonder who in Congress you see as the alt-right's biggest allies.
I would have said in terms of Congress and the Senate of Sessions, but I think a lot of these things can be done by giving a lot of basic bitch Republican stuff that they want and they've wanted for a long time. I think after some of these reports on Obamacare premiums going up, I think in controlling all three branches of government, I think yes, not all three branches of government, controlling both houses of Congress and the presidency, rather. I think repealing Obamacare is certainly possible. That's something that conservatives are constantly claiming they want. In terms of appointing a constitutional judge, I think that's clearly something Trump can give them. In terms of reducing regulations rather dramatically, that's clearly something Trump can give them. So it really is the art of the deal in a way. I don't think someone like Paul Ryan resonates with these ideas in any way. I don't think Paul Ryan wants to restrict immigration. I think he wants to do quite the opposite. But is it possible for Donald Trump to make a deal in this sense? To say, we have a tremendous amount of power right now. This is the last time we had this was midway through George W. Bush's first term. Could we give you things that you've been asking for, and you give us this one thing or this big thing that we need? And I think that is possible.
But beyond Sessions, no other names on the Hill come to mind in terms of folks that you see as natural allies on your immigration proposal?
Do we like any congressmen? Steve King. I mean, not really. I'm not really impressed with any of those people. I mean, again, it's not really about any of those people leading us or anything like that. It's about influencing them. I mean, politicians ultimately aren't terribly interesting. Donald Trump being a major exception. They're just, the idea is to influence them and move them and push them in your direction. But to really expect something from a politician, like he's going to actually care about his people and his civilization, that might be asking too much. But can we push them and influence them? Clearly, yes.
One other quick thing, if you don't mind. You, throughout this, have been pretty critical of George W. Bush, the neoconservatives, as you call them, especially in terms of foreign policy. But a number of folks that we've heard that Donald Trump is looking at for positions, like Secretary of State, for example, whether it's John Bolton, Rudy Giuliani, do have records of supporting a much more interventionist foreign policy than Donald Trump talked about on the campaign trail. So if it's Giuliani, if it's Bolton, I mean, is the alt-right going to make an effort to oppose those appointments?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know if we'll have to wait to see what happens. I don't know if someone like John Bolton is a deal breaker. I'm not maybe sure I'll go that far. But John Bolton is maybe not quite a neocon. He's clearly a neoconservative ally. He's clearly obsessed with Iran. I would be very, very concerned if he were appointed Secretary of State. Giuliani seems a little less ideological, and so that would be less concerning, to be honest. I'm not sure quite what I think of that. It's important to remember that the power of the Secretary of State. I think Hillary Clinton did have a lot of influence in bringing a kind of humanitarian, so-called interventionist, we came, we saw, he died type comments with Muammar Gaddafi. In the past, it's actually been the National Security Advisor that has had more influence in terms of shaping policy, Kissinger being an excellent example of that. So I think we just have to wait for these things to shake out. But I would say, I think I probably do speak for most of the alt-right. I think John Bolton, that would be a very, very concerning choice.
Just a quick one. For your moratorium on immigration, was white Europeans an exception to that, or was that all immigration?
I would certainly like to preference Europeans in terms of immigration, and if in doing that, we would that would entail far less immigration, just by the very nature of it. You want to talk?
I mean, technically, a moratorium means no net immigration. About 200,000 to 300,000 people leave the country every year. So you could have gross immigration, 200,000 to 300,000, and still have no net immigration. Richard, I think, would prefer to have Europeans in that 200,000 to 300,000.
Okay, one more. We'll answer it really quickly, and then okay. Since you've already asked a question, why don't we let you ask a question? The woman in the blue.
Jessica Taylor with NPR. You mentioned General Flynn a little bit earlier. Can you talk about what do you think about Trump's appointment of him as National Security Advisor?
Everything I've learned about Flynn has been positive. He seems to be a very realistic man. He is not aligned with neoconservatives in any way. And he seems to be an independent thinker. So I don't know a tremendous amount about General Flynn, but everything I see has been positive from my side. So I do think that Flynn as National Security Advisor, or someone else who is more in the realist camp as Secretary of State, I think that would really be a reset of foreign policy. I think that would be a wonderful thing. Does anyone else want to comment on that? All right. Thank you. We were very happy to talk with you. We want to do this again. I think this is a highly productive discussion. I would also like to thank you for coming. Thank you for obeying these rules in terms of not photographing any attendee's face. Let's do it again. But now it is time for you to go home. And it's time for us to enjoy the rest of the conference. So thank you all.